he's saying a huge amount of it is coming from online material that
Yeah.
people are viewing. These 3,000 referrals that they've had to the internet referral unit of material to them, 700 of those seem to relate to material generated in the UK that could well be illegal. And they're also saying that quite a lot of the material that they're looking at actually isn't real at all. Some of it's AI generated, and some of it relates to other conflicts, particularly the conflict in Syria.
What are we kind of looking at in terms of the sort of incidents and intelligence that's been picked up from what Matt Jukes is saying?
Okay, so what Matt's looking at is a kind of what he describes as a kind of dashboard of indicators, and what he was saying on Friday to the group of us he invited in to sort of explain what was happening was that that dashboard has got a set of needles which are all pointing in the wrong direction, and it's coming from a number of different sources. It's coming from online referrals of material that they're looking at that has a potentially radicalisation effect or a criminal could result in criminal charges. It's also coming from members of the public who are concerned about people who they've been in touch with or come across either online or in person, and that's calls into the anti-terrorist hotline, which have doubled. And it's also coming from MI5, who obviously have ongoing concerns about a number of individuals who may be plotting with violent intent. And all those things are combining into what he says is really an extraordinary moment where they're looking at a huge increase in the level of risk that they're trying to manage.
And did he, when you had that briefing with him, is he basically saying that a lot of this spike in activity, it is coming from what happened after events on October the 7th and this conflict?
That's exactly what he's saying. And he's saying a huge amount of it is coming from online material that
Yeah.
people are viewing. These 3,000 referrals that they've had to the internet referral unit of material to them, 700 of those seem to relate to material generated in the UK that could well be illegal. And they're also saying that quite a lot of the material that they're looking at actually isn't real at all. Some of it's AI generated, and some of it relates to other conflicts, particularly the conflict in Syria. And all that material is going out on the internet and serving to get people really quite angry and cross. And that's the problem that they're looking at, is the sheer volume of material that is going out there, some of it illegal, but also that it's stirring up this sense of anger and grievance that can then have a knock-on effect in terms of people looking to choose targets which may be in the UK rather than directing their justified protests against either party that they may feel is in the wrong in Israel and Gaza.
And in terms of some of this activity, do we have any sense of, who's sort of been involved in this? Are they adults? Are they children under the age of 18? Men, women, background? Do we have any sort of idea of that type of information?
So we know that men and women can be involved in that kind of radicalisation process, what Matt's called a radicalisation moment. But he's also concerned that quite a lot of these people are teenagers, and
Wow.
they've dealt with kids as young as 11 who have been consuming and sharing radical material, illegal material that could be instructional, could be encouraging terrorism. And they've seen a 13% increase in referrals to the Prevent program from, those are mainly from teachers who are seeing children talking about things in a potentially extremist way, and they want somebody more expert to then come and have a look at it. So that is quite a significant increase right there.
And do we know the sort of backgrounds, or is it children from a certain ethnic minority background, from certain religious background? What sort of information do we have on that?
So the increase in threat here really, and we questioned this when we were talking to Matt, because the Jewish community can get a threat from both sides. It can come from the far right and has, over the last couple of years, been seen quite a large increase in threat from the far right, although it's still small compared to the Islamist threat. But what he's saying here is that the growth here is from an Islamist threat, and he's really saying that the chatter is mainly directed at Jewish potential targets, and it's mainly coming from an Islamist standpoint. And the danger here, really, Aisha, is that people are not just simply talking about threatening Jewish targets, but that they might actually decide to go out and do something that they may hold the Jewish community responsible for the activities of the Israeli state, and that they may feel that there's an obligation on them to do something about it in the UK, and that they may decide to target somebody that really has no ability to do anything about what is happening in Israel and Gaza.
I mean, Duncan, this is incredibly serious and incredibly depressing as well. Everything you've just told us. I mean, it will be cause for real concern, and everybody should care about this. This is not good, particularly when you're talking about children as young as 11 being susceptible to be radicalised. What can be done about this? It's a very, very emotionally charged situation at the moment. We're watching this conflict play out. It is heartbreaking to see what's happening. On top of that, we're viewing all of this through social media. There's a lot of misinformation on top of all of that. It's a lot for anybody to be able to sort of get a handle on. What can be done to try and calm things down?
Well, look, I think no one is saying that people shouldn't feel passionately about what has happened to the 1,200 victims that were killed by Hamas, and to the many civilian casualties that have been inflicted in the Gaza Strip itself. Some of those images that we have seen have been heartbreaking, as you rightly say. And you know what? We've seen a lot more of those images than we might have done from another conflict such as Syria, because ISIS controlled those areas and was beheading journalists. A lot of those images just didn't come out of Syria, or if they did come out, they were really branded by ISIS and manipulated by them. However, we're getting independent journalism coming out of Gaza, and it's coming out in such a volume that people are feeling extremely strongly and passionately, and rightly so, about what has happened. The danger, of course, is where people turn that attention to what is on their doorstep because it's the easiest, if you like, thing to do. And of course, that threat won't necessarily stay with the Jewish community, because it's quite easy then for that threat to become, well, actually, it's our government that should be doing more about it, or actually, because you voted for the government, it's you lot that should do some more about it. But the Prevent program is there to help. It's there to provide individuals that can talk, particularly young people, down from that position of potentially taking action to trying to do something more political and more directed instead.
And of course, it's important to remember that, in recent history, we've had two members of parliament murdered while they were out and about doing their constituency work. I know of many MPs who have said to me that they have been inundated with death threats since this conflict and because of the vote. So it's a very febrile situation. But just, I suppose, put a slightly different perspective on this, Duncan. There might be some people listening who say that many people, particularly from different communities, Muslim community and others, have a mistrust about the prevention program as well. And there might be people saying, an 11-year-old, what's the threshold for being, referred to prevent? If a young person at school is voicing concern about what's happening in this conflict, which, as you say, is very understandable, is there, any danger that, they might be overly policed because, that there is a worry that happens?
Look, I mean, Prevent, there's no doubt, is a controversial project, and some people will say there are too many right-wing referrals, and they should be concentrating on the Islamic threat, and many people will say within the Islamic community that they feel targeted,
Yeah.
particularly by the program. But it is an off ramp. It's not a police action, and it is an opportunity for parents who are worried. And you know what? It came in huge use, particularly around Syria, where parents suddenly started to realize that if they didn't do something about this, their children were going to disappear on a flight to Turkey and sign up for
Oh
ISIS.
well, I
And,
mean, we have
and we're in,
The Shamima Begum story, of course.
Exactly. And people actually used that route and did start to contact prevent professionals to say, look, what can I do? How can you
Okay.
stop this happening? And I think we're in the same situation here. And what I would say is that when people say, oh, they're young, they're not going to do something, I think you've got to remember that one of those guys that blew themselves up on the tube, and we're not there, by the way, by any stretch of the imagination, but one of those had only just turned 19 and was still at college. So the threat does sometimes come from young, easily led people who are manipulated into doing things that their parents and those just a few years older than them would guide them out of. And we've got to remember that there is other action that can be taken here if you want to change
Okay.
the world. Political ways of doing it, and violence is not the answer.